this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests, the connected dots between their life experiences and what they're doing today. Today we have special guest Niraj Mehta. Niraj, if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
My name is Niraj, born and raised in California. Moved to Miami about 10 years ago. I'm currently a radiation oncologist and a choreographer. My passion is obviously oncology, but also connected to our own sort of holistic health and art and healing. And yeah, that's a little bit about
That's
me.
amazing. That's awesome. So, Neeraj, if you don't mind, if you could go back to your early childhood, any motivations, any inspirations that, any things that stick out that you can connect to what you're doing today that kind of served as a trigger or something.
Absolutely. I mean, I think down the medical pathway, I think just
Mm-hmm.
like, being a son of an engineer, education was always a big deal in that sense. So
Mm-hmm.
you always tended to, wanted to kind of grow up in that environment and, helping people. And so in a certain way, that's kind of, I went down that track, in a sense. But my earliest memories are definitely, watching these Amitabh Bachchan movies, maybe I watched them when I was a little bit too young. I should have been probably watching something more age appropriate. But in the end of the day, it was just about, with respect to Bollywood, it was sort of like the expression and emotion of the person connected to the song and the moves and this and that. And I mentioned
Yeah.
that only because now, with where I have now, what I kind of do now in terms of, the project Making Moves Universal, it really has to
Mm-hmm.
do with that same thing, that same form of expression, and so I've kind of carried that throughout, and it kind of is the fundamental of it's you're sort of like reminded to what it was about for you as a child. And in
Yeah.
terms of the art, it's really about the same thing, although of course you tend to try to mature the idea and hope to use it, maybe as a benefit in the medical world for your patients and for yourself, quite frankly, for myself, because it's what
Of course.
sort of makes me excited and helps you bring the joy and the passion into your workspace.
For
That's
sure.
awesome. Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of your experiences from your early childhood followed you throughout the rest of your life. That's what it sounds like, right? It's because you're taking elements of what you got from the emotion expression, the all the expressions of those movies, and you're basically taking elements of that and applying it to everything you're doing today. So it sounds like there must have been like a triggering moment for you. Like maybe it was a specific movie or specific moment, especially in like the film with Amitabh Bachchan, that made you like ingrain that idea in your head. Like, do you think there was a defining moment like that, or was it just a little bit of everything?
The defining moment was when we were at our, maybe I was third, fourth grade. Our families, they sort of got together. They had a family group, and we had a Diwali parties. And sort of like around that time, my parents were like, that was encouraged me to do something, and it was like always like a song to do. And so the defining moment, I think, was those times when you felt like what it was like, Jab bhi koi ladki dekho, like an Indian song or whatever, and you're just boom, you're into it. And the defining moment was why I felt so free doing that, right? And then,
Wow.
I think those were the defining moments. I mean, when you're like, oh, cool, I'll do it again. Okay, I'll do it again. Okay, no one else is doing it. People are kind of like this. People are gonna look at you. Whatever, I'll keep doing it, right? So it's like
Yeah.
that sort of like childlike sort of inclination to repeat something, right? Is sort of a clue, potentially, and you try to
Mhm.
put those clues together within the context of whatever you're doing at the time, right? And so at that point, it's like where passion becomes profession and profession becomes passion. I think that line becomes blurry, but the reason why you're doing it maybe stays the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you mentioned motivation of the early kind of childhood, just quick question. So Raj obviously is a very filmy name for our Indian listeners here. Is actually one of the most famous artists, Shah Rukh Khan. Used to have a lot of. Was he your favorite as well, or is just kind of you try to kind of word play since you already had the name and you wanted to just kind of make it up to that?
What a phenomenal question. It actually has nothing to do with that. I mean, so growing up, Niraj. Ni is a
Yeah.
short vowel. It should have been Nee, right? So they used to call
Correct.
me Niraj, right? Niraj. And then when I was like sort of in the entertainment world at some point, I'm like, I just want to go at Raj. I feel it. I feel the
Yeah.
Raj man coming out. Like, and it was more just like, hey, there's that Raj. It was like that goofy side that like, hey, that was like sort of the element of when you're an art, like I guess when you're an artist, you're free. So it had nothing to do with like whether or not I think people can pronounce it right.
I
It's
see.
just kind
Okay.
of that in that entertainment choreography space. It's like you go and you just kind of take on a name, and it's obviously easier for people to pronounce. But guess what? I still connect to it in that way. So in a certain way, it kind of gives you a connection
Yeah.
to a different identity, and obviously, if it's associated with another language or whatever, then you can go that way too.
That's
So
awesome.
in some senses, the name chose you as well, then it sounds like.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I opened my mouth and just said it like this, even though that wasn't it at that moment. And then for those people, they
Mhm.
refer to me as Raj in that sense, right? But I would never ask like my parents to call me that.
Got it. So just like a feel good moment for you. It just, you felt in the moment, you're like, I like this name, let's go with it. I like
It
that.
was more like, you know what, you wanted to simplify it, but let's go with it. And then the people like they just call me that, and in that sense, even in Brazil, well, they can't say Raj. The R isn't an R, right? In Portuguese, the R becomes a H, so it's like
Mhm.
Raj, and then the diminutive form is like Inho, right? So it's like I became Rajinho in Brazil, and I really felt that name too. I guess it kind of
Yeah.
it brings on different alter egos, right? And everyone has those names, right?
Yeah.
Whether someone made fun of you or whether it was that, it becomes kind of like the way people know you in a way.
Awesome. Well, actually, that's a great segue into our next topic, Neeraj, which you mentioned during our earlier discussion when we were talking before, that you actually find yourself associated a lot with the Brazilian culture as well. So, how did that happen exactly? And what's that story? What's the
It's a
story behind that?
it's a phenomenal question. I think I mean there was always like a sort of I really didn't even know that Brazil even really existed until I was maybe like 29 or 30 years old, and I went there once with some friends. And when I went there, I always had in the back of my head, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of like love in the air. People are goofy, it's silly, it's kind of ironically very simple. They still have a lot of that excitement and energy of the movement, like sort of Indian culture, but it felt just a
Hmm.
little bit more loose and free. And so I always felt the connection, but I never got a chance to connect because I didn't speak the language. And then ironically, I had an opportunity to sort of do a part of my residency abroad. So I spent six
Nice.
weeks in a rural hospital in Brazil, but I went there already knowing some of the music, right? And they kind of helped me pick it up in a very short period of time. But I was there during a music festival working at the hospital. And so I kind of connected with the music there and the expression. And then just one thing leads to the next, and you kind of write your own destiny in this day and age with all this, with all the music and sort of things we have to help each other. Then you kind of just start trying to speak it and interact, to kind of gain access to yourself when you're sort of speaking that language. Another part of you kind of comes out. Same way, when you hear people speaking in Hindi, yeah, they are saying the same thing, but there's a different sort of a vibe to it, right?
Yeah.
It's like when
Hmm.
it's that, and you can't really express that in another language. I mean, you can translate the
Yep.
words,
Hmm.
but so that's really where that story came on, and I sort of just took it to the next level just because that's what I like to do in
Okay.
terms of that language. Yeah.
That's awesome. So would you ever consider like moving to Brazil?
Oh, that's a great question. To move in versus to visit. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like that, and that's a very important concept. I mean, I think consider what in this day and age. I always say, would I consider anything? You know what I say? Paint me the situation. but but on the most part, I mean, I think we're accustomed to certain things in the United States going from A to B. Sometimes in maybe places which might have a better, let's just say, social culture, you might not get an A to B. So you'd have to be willing to be patient in that sense for all those things. So as it is now, it's kind of tough. I'm kind of an ABCD. You're an American, so to then try to get and like I said, I always try to bring that vibe here, but that
Hmm.
would be a sort of a stretch in that sense. And someone will always tell you, it's like, oh, you like it here, cool. Your perspective might be different. You have to live here, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it. It's like some places are great periods of time, but then when you live there, then you see it's not all rose-colored glasses. I get it. what we were talking about right before this podcast recording. It's in life, for a lot of things, it depends is the perfect answer because, like you said, depending on the scenario, your perspective might be very different.
Absolutely. And your time and place. So it's easy to say that you wanted something, but it's hard to really put that into, it doesn't make too much sense if you weren't there at this moment right now.
Yep, yep. Awesome. And what about the Spanish language? Did you find a motivation to learn that somewhere in the Latin, or
Yeah, so that
recently,
was
or
in
like what's
parallel, right? When you're growing up in
okay?
LA, you're always going to have a little bit of Spanish, but that
I
Spanish is
see.
also coming from a specific part of Mexico that shared a border, right? So you were used to a certain type of culture. So the Latin
Right.
culture is super diverse outside of that, but I didn't know that. I didn't know a lot of things,
Yeah.
which I was surprised at now. But then when I got into, obviously when I was moving to Miami, I started really connecting with it. And this day and age, I can use, you can use patience as a way of like learning more and more, have people correct you. Of course, you're using it a lot. You're seeing the ways different countries and people of different countries speak the language, right? And then when you visit it, you kind of tend to unpackage another kind of connection with it. And then you kind of just gradually learn it. It's not like, oh, you set out to like learn a language. I mean, think about all the choices we all have what to do, right? But it
Hmm.
has to be something that you feel passionate about. And obviously the music part, I can kind of go on and on and on of different types of music with that. And then you
Hmm.
kind of mimic the words and you know how it is.
Yeah. And
And with
actually, I was going to say Spanish is
yeah,
actually a really interesting language just because there's so many dialects of it as well, right? So, like, for example, Dominican Spanish is very different than, like, Spain Spanish, like the Castilian Spanish or Catalan Spanish. So it's
Exactly.
interesting because the word choices vary dramatically depending on which Latin American country you're talking about.
Absolutely. And that's I think what you're getting into from what I'm hearing you say is that, word choices, you can say dialect, but I think what you also mean is expressions.
Yeah.
Expressions change, right? Expressions are worth 1,000 or maybe a million words, right? And
yep.
so when you can see that, and there's different accent things, you can see that. I mean, dialects, thankfully, if you're speaking like grammatically correct Spanish, like you'll be okay, but you're absolutely right. Sometimes the expression is so regionalized and the flow of the words, you have to get used to how fast people go. And you're absolutely right. The actual way it sounds is completely different, and that I can see my accent changing, which came more from like LA was like Latino, Chicano culture type accent to
Hmm.
more of like a diverse sort of a South American accent. But it's just an accent change, and there's certain words that I still remember, over there that
Yeah.
we you wouldn't really use here, but it's kind of fun to say it because you remember that in your head growing up.
Yeah.
Yep. And from the art perspective, Zolani, you alluded to this a little bit before. You're with every language, you're actually unlocking an entire culture, right? An entire understanding of culture expressions. How people think, what kind of food do they eat, how do they enjoy themselves, and so on. And I can see that in your choreography as well. So that's pretty amazing to see.
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah. So what you're saying is, yeah, essentially, that different kind of thing unlocks a different part of the culture. And then I would add within you. And so sometimes it's kind of your connection with it. And you're
Oh
absolutely
yes.
right. I mean, if you could notice that in some of the movement, then my job has been accomplished.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
So,
Okay. Mhm. Go for
what
it.
I was gonna say, so when it comes to the choreography piece, right? Do you have a specific style of choreography that you really enjoy, or you like a little bit of a blend of a different types of choreography?
Well, I feel like you know me now. You know the answer I'm gonna say.
It
If you're
depends.
gonna be mixed
It
it up,
depends.
it's not even close, right? Like I wouldn't even. The way I learned it is kind of in a sense the way. If you think about Bollywood, it's kind of the sense of what people we talk about Bollywood because there's the music, right? But the style of movement it was not like it was borrowed from like in the 70s and 80s. You had disco culture. You had you had the beats were disco culture, and then of course you see some elements of classical. You see everything happening. In a sense, that's what I am now. Drawing from these different styles that I may learn maybe the basic step, but right once that gives you that rhythm, it gives you a new way of kind of playing with it. And so I always felt that you could sort of rearrange those things, and it's a little bit of everything.
Great,
Got it.
fantastic.
That makes sense. So, Neeraj, talking about the next thing. So, talk to us a little bit more about how do you connect the dance forms of the movement with healing, right? how does that connection look like to you? Like, how do you think about that particular aspect of it?
Great. I mean, on one side, you have the whole sort of the way I think of it in terms of like you have the whole science of movement, right? You have a lot of that. And that's a science right now. Obviously, we can talk about basic elements of cardiovascular exercise, but it gets a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more complex about inflammation. You have all that part. Then
Mm-hmm.
you have like the science of meditation, right? Which is where you even have like, brainwave activity and they do that. So essentially, if you can think about it, it's sort of blending two known sciences together in a way where, you're connected to the present moment, connected to yourself. So not only do you get the physical benefits of movement, right? But you also get sort of the functional part, right? So that's why I focus a lot less on dance and more on functional movements. And that's just the way I would do it now from like the background, just kind of moving around and kind of like liking to take these classes.
I
But then
see.
I think you have a profound mental and emotional component. I mean, anyone can attest whether or not they feel like they're moving their body to how they feel when they're listening to a song. So we experientially know that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we can safely draw upon some of the, you know, um, studies on music therapy, all those kinds of things,
Yeah.
to know that it has a healing effect. So you put two and two together, and then obviously I think for most people it would make some sort of sense, right? And so the next step is to kind of make it a compelling case, and how do we combine that into the practice? I think that's really the challenge.
And how do we make it universal?
Well,
I don't.
universal was I just love universal because I feel like I just had a connection to that word, right? Because
Yeah.
I always
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
the making moves part, yes, there's a physical aspect of it, but in general, I mean, everything we're doing is a move, right? And some of those
Yeah.
moves, while we think they're so different, I mean, I don't think they're really that different. Whether or not
Yep.
you choose to start this podcast, you're following your passion or calling, and you have this
Mm-hmm.
calling, and then it ties back to some of the philosophical elements of like, the hero's journey, which is a repetitive thing we all go through in a way. And so
Yep.
we're not really changing anything and changing ourselves. We're just making these moves, and over time, gradually, we notice a change, in a sense. And so it becomes a
Absolutely.
little less intimidating that while we think we're doing all these things, we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, and it's beautiful how many different aspects that the single word encompasses, right? What you just described. So basically, from all different angles, you can think about it, and then it'll still come down to the essence is just really, really there with
Yeah,
this word.
yeah, I think so.
It's interesting because I know from a movement perspective, you focused on holistic healing, right? But what's also interesting is it also seems like you focus on holistic learning. And the reason I say
Yeah,
that,
wow.
and the reason I say that is because you're drawing upon so many different elements, right? You based it on, science, you based it off of meditation, dance techniques, and, like so many different elements, and also the cultural aspect. So it seems like if I'm gonna put myself in your shoes for a second, it sounds like your approach to life is holistic healing, but then also holistic learning. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, that's just not a fair statement. That was actually something that I actually never used together. So I find that your juxtaposition is exceedingly on point.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I really like it because actually it then reflects that, as the healer, potentially you are the one that's learning, right? And to a
Hmm.
certain extent, a lot of us need that type of learning. Like we need to know, oh, this means this, and oh, now we're talking about, from the cancer coaching side that I had. It's a program called Cancer Awakens that I've had so many reading elements that kind of led me to this. But, you have this whole aspect of, oh, okay. Oh, so now we're talking about, mental. Oh, okay. Like how do we go there? It's like, oh, okay. What are limiting mental beliefs, right? How do they serve you? Basic stuff, right? Like, or basic, like your emotions. If you have a negative emotion, it's probably coming from a valid need. Like you might want to figure that out type stuff, right? Um, so you're absolutely right. I mean, the learning journey becomes less like sort of abstract and a little bit more concrete. And then again, you learn how to paint with different colors of the wind, depending upon who you're talking to, and where and when and why.
Definitely. All right. So I have one other question now, building upon that, right? So I know you lived in the LA area up until age 30, and in the last 10 years, you moved to Miami, right? So when it comes to your journey as developing in the experiences that you've had and what you're doing today, do you think that shift from LA to Miami dramatically influenced like your outlook on life and as well as like your views on medicine and like movement, or do you think is more something that happened independent of that move, that transition?
Great question. Certainly not independent. I would definitely say there was a huge dependency on having that opportunity, being involved in the different sort of cultures and sort of playing with that idea. You know, as you can imagine, you know, I've tried some of the sessions in the clinic. I've tried so many different things, and it's been great. Like, but all that exploration was definitely tied to the learning that I've had here and sort of the freedom in which I was able to sort of, you know, paint with those palettes, but those palettes have an origin, right? So, you know, I don't think I strayed that far from who I really was, because I talk about another pivotal moment. I was sitting there in 10th grade or whatever, 11th, 12th grade in a theory of knowledge class, right? It's like philosophy, and I loved it, right? So again, I'm coming back into the healing, but what you so keenly pointed out, that yeah, it's about healing, but there's also learning, which maybe comes from a little bit of this philosophical element where it becomes less prescriptive and more self-directed, right? And that's exactly what you said and mentioned, but of course the environment influenced big time.
Fantastic. So then I guess pivoting off that question, what's been like your favorite memory or experience in Miami versus a favorite memory or experience in LA?
Favorite experience in Miami, I think, I mean, I can go, there's so many of them. I mean, I'm not really good at picking superlatives. I mean, everything from having, you know, a news coverage of a story of one of our classes in the clinic to being able to have a get together where you had people from different sort of cultures and elements, but still same vibe, speaking different languages and combining that together. I mean, just in the setting of a barbecue, right? That's a very cool, fun moment for me to see people connecting like that. Maybe that's just kind of the social side of me in a sense, to able to connect people together. And then after you make the move, you know, sometimes that's all it really takes. You know, you don't really have to take everything down. You know, some people meet some new people and that. So that was a powerful moment here when you can really see that energy and diversity. I think in LA, it was always like being, you know, I guess all my memories of sort of being on stage and the feeling of wanting to win and all these you know, competitions and things like that, that competitive spirit, you know, came from there, right? And so in a certain sense, you know, I still have that, and reconnecting with that and combining it with, you know, maybe the fact that, you know, we're all sort of competing with ourselves in a way, in a good way, to make yourself better. I think it kind of makes sense that those kind of things were implanted at that time.
Got it.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Okay. So Neeraj, that's extremely helpful. Thanks so much for sharing that. So now pivoting to what's been buzzing lately, I guess.
Nice. The buzz on town, baby. The buzz.
So obviously we saw your and Sheetal's story unfold, which is incredible, absolutely beautiful. I think we all were kind of gushing over your union on this TV show. But talk to us, how did that happen in the first place? Like uh, I'm assuming you guys did not meet through the matchmaker. It was an independent, uh, you know, process. And, you know, how did that start? How long ago was it? And how can I, like, as much as you
Yeah.
want to share.
That's it. No, it's a very good question. I mean, to be honest, you know, this whole time, you know, obviously, you know, I've had relationships here, but actually, we were introduced via text through a common friend by that was connected to her sister, who now lives close by in South Florida. So actually, even after this, you know, entire journey and stuff, the long way, it was literally just a hey, and this person had no other reason to kind of reach out to me, to be honest. And this person actually, you know, is no longer here. He passed, unfortunately. But the crazy thing is that after that connection, I just, you know, made the actual connection and started talking to her. I met her, you know, up in January, and we were in connection, like pen pals, like text pals, for like two months, right, before I even met her. And so by April was when, you know, that was happening. And then I knew at the time that she was doing the show, and I knew kind of where she was sort of going, and I was kind of really excited about that for her. But it was at that time that, you know, she, now that the story was kind of changing for her, we wanted to kind of find a way to help frame that in the context of the reality show.
Oh,
wow, okay.
interesting.
Yeah, and so she
Okay.
asked me. I mean, it was a question, and I was like, heck yeah. I mean, I kind of really like kind of the fact that her sort of her bold moves and kind of what she was doing, and I was like, yeah, sure, like let me be a part of this. And for me, it was just hopefully it was using all those 38 or 9 years through this art and stuff just to be in that present moment. So that's all it was for me in that sense. So it's kind of cool to just kind of be able to be yourself when you don't have to, that's how it happened.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, how was that experience of like being on camera though, right? Because I mean, I don't know if you've been on camera before, but not
I
everyone's comfortable
have,
being on camera, right? So it's like,
I
was that?
have, right?
Oh, got it. Got it. Okay.
And the funny thing is that when you're on camera, I mean, the motto is one thing and one thing only, whether you're in the camera or whether you see actors do it. It's called no acting, please. So as a matter of fact, when you're on camera, you have more of an incentive to be in the present moment, right? Acting is reacting,
Mm,
right? And so that's all that was
yep.
happening, right? There was a moment. There was nothing you really had to stretch, right? If you wanted to say a cheesy line, it was because it was really coming and what you felt at that time, right? And so I think that luckily, like being on at least on stage or whatever, at some point I stopped, like I started just kind of connecting with myself at times, and at that point you're doing the same thing, but you're doing it in the form of conversation, which is the same thing I'd be doing with movement, right? And so in a sense, for me, that wasn't that big of a stretch, although it was a fun experience, right? Like to kind of make that moment grand, right? Which is exactly what we're trying to do in life in general. So it was cool.
Awesome. And what
Wow.
has been your experience after that premiere? Because I'm sure
So
there's
after
been.
that,
Yeah. Go ahead.
can you be specific?
Well, what I mean is that you probably had an idea in your head on like how things might be after the episode was released, and like, did that transpire? Like, what exactly what you were thinking? Did that transpire afterwards? Or did you have a
Very,
very
very,
different?
very awesome question. So obviously at the beginning, I didn't know that much, and I didn't really think too much about it, except for kind of, you know, hearing from her and stuff, right? So, what I anticipated, I didn't really anticipate what was going on. I figured people would watch it, but because I had so much movement, metaphorically, going on in my life, and so did she, we were really focused on getting to know each other and also like, continuing with our whatever we're doing. So I didn't really have a chance to predict that. But even though I've been starting my, the Instagram projects, but I think afterwards it was really cool. You have the one part that I kind of knew but I didn't, is just people kind of reaching out in a sense. Number two, the questions that it arises, right? Not just about like, how we find a match, right? But like where it goes from there. I mean, the
Hmm.
questions don't always arise. They arise from like entertainment and people's visceral reactions to things, but they're all there, right? There are all these interesting, intriguing things. What comes people together? Well, what does this mean? And now you have this,
Yep.
and we're following this. So that part of it is there. And then
Hmm.
also for me personally, no, it's just cool to see like people reaching out to her about her being able to just be herself and talk and be sort of inspiration for other people trying to find this thing, kind of a match thing. And that's that. But I also thought it was very interesting to see, entertainment is always like the punching bag of society, right? So it's very interesting to see all these sentiments that it arises in other people. And it's very easy to like kind of get like, oh, someone thinks that you plan to be on it, or someone thinks you did this and this, or someone thinks you're putting a lot of mental energy into being present and into just being like, yo, I want to support a journey and be. So there's a lot of those things. So all those things actually are very interesting to me. If you just take your ego out of it, like, where does this come from? You know,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
there's this obsession with the authentic. What's authentic? What's legitimate? What's this? What's that? Right? And I think it's a reflection of what kind of we all feel. Not that deep. It's pretty light. It's pretty obvious, but obviously
Yeah.
strong. If an emotion is elicited, and there are some strong ones, I think there's something there behind it, because I don't think that anybody has the playbook on relationships so far.
Yep. Yep. That makes total sense. Well, all the best to you. Our best wishes, and we will be kind
Wow.
of cheering you from the outside.
Thank you so
Uh,
much, man.
so I think, Ketal, do you have any other questions on this particular topic? Otherwise, we can just move on to the rapid
Um,
fire section.
on this topic, no, but we can move on to the next section.
Okay, so next section, Neeraj, is actually really a rapid fire round.
Cool.
As the name suggests, first thing that comes to mind. And let me know when you're ready, and we'll just jump right into it.
Ready.
All right. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay. Mountains or beaches?
Beaches.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have guessed mountains anyway. Mountain person or night owl?
Morning.
Okay. What's your favorite comfort food?
Tandoori chicken.
Okay. What's your favorite virtue in others?
Open-mindedness.
Nice. That's a new one. Biggest pet peeve?
Narrow-mindedness.
The opposite. That makes sense. That'd be the first thing that comes to mind, right? The opposite of what you said earlier.
I don't know. I can't make it up.
Okay. What's your secret superpower that nobody knows about?
Love and joy in very, very, very simple things.
Wow. Okay. What's a superpower you wish you had?
Very, very good organizational skills.
Okay. All right. I think that's it. The next one is actually not a rapid fire question, but just wondering, what's been your biggest accomplishment in the last 1 or 2 years?
By far and away is discovering that while I love the aspect that I could connect making moves universal to the healing, to cancer, to choreography, by far and away, the biggest accomplishment is using that as a platform to learn more about myself. There's no doubt about it. Through past relationships and through even Chito, like as a mirror of like who and what you really are and your insecurities, and to free yourself a little bit from the parts of the ego that don't serve you. And what I mean by that in layman's language is the fear and stuff that keeps you behind, and even the way you kind of judge and see things. So it really had way more to do with myself as a person, as an artist, than it really had to do with, whatever I was, offering to the world per se. And that was cool.
That's awesome. So if I were to try to translate what you said in my own words, is that basically saying overcoming limiting beliefs?
Overcoming limiting beliefs, yes, but more I think overcoming sort of the challenges. I think limiting beliefs, true, yeah, it's a great way of saying it. That would be more of a mental thing. I think also more an understanding your emotions and your desires and that kind of thing, right? You're absolutely right. I definitely did. That definitely happened in so many ways. But again, when it connects more to the way you are as a person, it becomes less, mind oriented and more sort of heart oriented. Like, yeah, like what was that kind of stuff. So you're absolutely right. You're on definitely that track.
Okay, got it. So let me rephrase that. See if I completely understood it. Basically, understand yourself better as well as overcome limiting beliefs.
Boom. Yeah,
there
exactly. And even as they are connected to the limiting beliefs. Absolutely. Everything. Yeah, absolutely correct. That's great. Understand yourself better as they are, understand limiting beliefs as they're connected to yourself. Like, that's right.
Awesome. So I actually have a fantastic question for you now. And that question is, what is next for you? Because it sounds like you've done a lot of different things, learned about a lot of different things, healed a lot of people, right? What's next for you? Like, do you have an idea of what's next, or are you just taking it as it comes?
I think right now I'm, started personally my project on Instagram where I'm starting to mix in the philosophy with the movement, right? And it's just to get some conversation and feedback on that, right? So that's something I can do that's, sort of apart from being in a physical location. I'm also going to start a kind of step-by-step, movement program that I can then implement with some other partners that are doing some work on these like kind of online platforms, right? So you can create a step 1 through 10 like type videos, probably doing that. I think that also maybe there's a little bit more exploration as a radiation oncologist over the next 10 years, maybe change the environment, maybe change the setting, maybe, push the envelope a little bit more professionally in that sense. But with that would maybe sprinkle a little bit more of this sort of, artistic element that you want into that. And then of course, growing through the relationship. I think that undeniably that's also, one and two. I think
Okay.
there's definitely those are two things that are intertwined.
All right, that sounds awesome. So narrowing in on the content creation piece, you talk about a lot of, video creations, all that. Do you have like a platform in mind, or are you trying to do all platforms, or like what's your
Oh, right
thoughts on
now
that?
I've started on sort of TikTok and Instagram, and really just getting some feedback on, how the movement philosophy is connected to the philosophy of sort of opening people up, less prescriptive in a sense. So that's really the platform that I want to kind of mess around on, TikTok and Instagram in that sense, just because, TikTok is is a platform of like that kind of freedom. But I'm always looking for new angles, always looking for new things. I feel like I'm able to do that or can do that or be excited about learning how to do that in a very creative way. And I can really be free with that in so many different angles. I'm always open to those ideas. And if someone goes and, hey, do it and see how people react to it, and then go from there.
Cool. I mean, have you thought about YouTube? Because you hit two of the big platforms, but I didn't hear YouTube, so I'm so
Yeah,
curious.
I mean, I haven't. So I had a YouTube, just like your own like past performances have all that, and I have a YouTube channel, but I haven't really differentiated yet what the content is going to be on YouTube versus something else, right? So I got to think about maybe, um, obviously channeling in on a couple things that you're doing, but then in a sense, being able to then put some of those up on the same way. Actually, there's no reason why whatever's on Instagram shouldn't be on YouTube either. So.
Yeah, yeah, especially YouTube Shorts, right? Like maybe the long
Yeah.
form video that'd be very different, but YouTube Shorts.
That's great, man. I love that idea. I really appreciate that. That didn't even like cross my mind because I was just trying to, I'm working with, a manager right now, but more from the sense of like holding me accountable, and like doing homework, right? Doing homework. Like it goes back to doing homework in my eyes. I mean, maybe I'm wrong or whatever, but in the artistic space, it just comes about repeating what it is you do, right? Number one, it's a testament to
Mhm.
yourself, and number two, it's probably the only way. So that's great. So
Yeah.
I'll see how we can put some of those things up.
Yeah,
And
and
with YouTube, you also can, unlock a whole new set of audiences as well, which
That's
is
a good
different
idea,
from.
man. There's people that just do YouTube, totally.
yeah, so
Sorry, Kiran was saying.
Niraj, I did want to give you an opportunity to plug some of your social media profiles. So if you want to
Oh,
share
sure.
your TikTok, Instagram, any other platforms.
Yeah, man. For Instagram and TikTok, it would be at Dr. Raj Moves, Dr. Moves. And then, yeah, and on Facebook, it's just Niraj Mehta for now. And I have a website right now. It's nirajmetamd.com.
All right, fantastic. So if you guys are interested in learning more about holistic healing as well as movement, as well as healing through movement, be sure to give him a follow throughout whichever is your platforms of choice.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. I really, really appreciate it. Obviously, hearing myself talk about all this stuff and you guys kind of relaying it back. It's been a great, great experience. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Absolutely.
course. Of course.
So, Neeraj, before we wrap, there's one question we like to ask all our guests. So, do you have any piece of recommendations for our listeners? And just for your reference, a recommendation could be a book, a movie, a TV series, anything, piece of media that you came across recently that really inspired you or stuck with you in some way.
Yeah, yeah, I would probably list a couple books.
Okay.
The first one is Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, where he basically breaks down all the Eastern traditions and cultures and religions and all that kind of, and he summarizes it into the hero's journey, which everyone can relate to, inner and outer, and that's what the basis of Star Wars is. But The Power of Myth is in interview form. So it's a guy named Bill Moyer
Mm.
just interviewing this guy. He's going off the cuff. And this guy just puts things together in a very creative way, and it's very practical, and it kind of gets you to think about things and more philosophical. And the other one that's very practical is called Love and Be Free. It's actually written by a Hindu. He's a Brazilian Hindu, and he kind of writes about
Huh.
kind of the new or modern marriage that he thinks makes an argument for marriage, but in this new way, in a sense of like using these ways of kind of like learning, seeing each other as mirrors, and it's very practical and also useful and quite beautiful as well. So I think it kind of goes into that as well. So it's a pretty good journey, especially if you're inclined to like learn things about yourself through your own relationships.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing those suggestions. As we close out this podcast recording, I did want to ask one question, and that is, do you have any questions for us?
No, I mean, I guess the question is, like, what's next for you guys? And where do you, and obviously you guys are doing this, a lot. So what's next for you guys?
Yeah, sure. So a couple different things actually. So, I mean, we're about 15 episodes in terms of what we've officially released, and we so far recorded have a backlog about like 8 or 9 episodes. So we're still getting started. Our cadence right now is like one episode a week. But in
Nice.
terms of what's next, we're just trying to. So we view this platform as a great opportunity to like diversify our perspective. So hear from people from all walks of life, get to understand their story, their thought processes, why they're successful and what they're doing, all those type of things. And then just ingrain those learnings into ourselves and
Mm.
probably try to apply them however best we can, right? So that's one component of it. The other piece of it is it's so much fun talking to different types of people, right?
Aha, nice.
So there's a social aspect of it as well. And then it's also you build a network in the process, right? It's like you build a relationship through conversation with lots of different people. So we establish a stronger network. We have fun in the process. Maybe in the future, it's like, as we connect with so many people in so many different industries, it could translate into business opportunity as well, right? Maybe we
Absolutely.
maybe we find our future partner for some future venture that we're doing. We don't know, but
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
viewing that as another platform as well. And then obviously the content creation part as well. Just the journey of
Yes.
starting a podcast is a huge learning experience, right?
Yeah.
The audio
Yeah.
editing, we haven't done video yet. The video, the marketing piece, the branding piece, the social media usage piece. So far, our primary platforms have been Instagram, and we just got started onto YouTube. And I mean, a part of all the audio streaming services, right? So Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Spotify, all that. Apart from that, we've been only on a couple of platforms, but over time, as we get better and better at this, probably expand to other platforms as well, like YouTube Shorts, like I just suggested to you.
That's awesome, man. I mean, that's great that, the art of investigation is definitely an art. So I cheers to you guys, and obviously anything I can do, just yeah, let me know. And obviously I'm always open to suggestions and or things that I could we can collab with.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. And we'd love to have you back, Neeraj, at some point, maybe for a year from now, just kind of check in, how things went, and, kind of the amazing thing
Sure.
that you've done in the last 1 year, and what are your, the next billion YouTube followers talking about, and so on. So we'd love to
Awesome, man. I like it. I
talk
like it. I
again.
love it. I like the way you're talking, man. Thank you guys.
all right. Well, fantastic. So if you guys are not already connected already, please give us a follow at Your Life Unfiltered on Instagram.
Mhm.
We would also for our listeners to leave a review on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Amazon Music, whatever your streaming service of choice is. We hope you got a lot of value from this episode, and thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.